So full disclosure, Ryan, we did try to do this together once prior to this.
We
were in the zones in some ways.
It was. You ever do one of those podcasts where you like feel just the pleasure of God as you're doing it? Like
very nice time for me too. A combination of incompetence and technical
just lost the footage.
Bowel movements, but all of it went away. Yeah, that's an industry term you need to learn. So
it's a little inside
needless to say, if you sense, I don't know what you'll sense, but I'm a big disclosure guy. If you sense something, this is because this is round 2.
If you feel like we're over it and we just have tread this ground before, it's because we have.
Yeah, it's because we have.
And we are over it.
But we saddle back up because we're
professionals.
That's what people on the streets are saying, at least.
So we moved to this room where there's not an off-center TV behind us.
Right.
Trying to step our game.
Yes, we did appreciate the feedback. Turns out you guys were 100% right. As soon as
turns out no one paid attention to anything we said in the last video.
All right, in the saddle.
Palmyra's Great Give is in 5 days, 4 days. 4 days if this airs on Tuesday. Who knows? Whenever you're watching this, it's on Saturday, September 28th.
Yeah, it's coming up hard.
Give at Palmyra.gives. We're trying to raise a bunch of money for nonprofits and community organizations in town, and we are organizing a basketball tournament. So whenever you're seeing this, email Brian McAllister, Brian, BRIN.McAllister3@gmail if you want to register a team.
Boy, that's a steel trap, buddy.
Just
out with it. Just from the holster, you just remember the email and everything.
I can't remember basic conversations I have with my wife from day to day, but I can remember Brian McAllister's email address.
It's both fortunate and unfortunate at the same time.
Way more unfortunate than it's fortunate.
See, I'm the opposite of you. I have a garbage memory with the details. Can't remember any of that stuff. But I remember your kid had like a bunny, and there was like this. I remember the weirdest
not my
details.
Kid, their kid.
Just random.
Your kid
random person I met 10 years ago. I remember that, which actually does, ironically enough, pay off in the interpersonal relationship. But then you lose all that credibility when you don't remember the name at the end. Of the conversation.
So you're like, oh, hello, how's Mr. Bunny?
Yeah, how's your kid? And they're like, wow. And then you're like, Ralph, Dan.
It's Cynthia, actually. Yeah. Way off.
What'd you think of the message, Ryan?
It was good, man. Terry's crushing it so far. It's a hard question for me to answer.
You're highly invested.
Too close to it. Hard on all this stuff, but
the time for salvation is now. That was a powerful statement that stayed with me. My favorite part about the way Terry approached it was the call to see creation a little broader than we often tend to do it, and there's a lot of reasons for that. We've gotten stuck in locking horn disputes.
Creation is in the origins of the universe, the Genesis 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, my interpretation of his sermon was he started there to make the case for purpose, intention, God's fingerprint on a very purposeful thing, and then he ended in a very personal, almost Great Commission kind of call out of that, which is great. And the way I'm going to steer this, though, seriously, is to maybe cover some ground conversationally that you often don't cover when you see this word in bold black print, right? At least if you grew up when I grew up, you tend to maybe lock horns on some controversial issues, maybe just hit one note of the chord of conversation. And in this case, there's so much more.
There's a time for those conversations, but I think in the context of what we're doing in Focus is building brick by brick this Christian worldview, and so in that sense, we're looking more at what is the theological import of creation.
Right, it's much more purposeful in this case.
And it's a super important brick because we're talking about God's intent, the why of creation, as Terry said, right? Why did God create the world when He didn't have to? Why did God create us? That's the big one, right? As we're building brick by brick this stuff, and we get into sin, and we get into Jesus and the death and resurrection and all that, we really lose our sense of gravity if we don't start with an understanding of why God created people in the first place.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. Because if you interact with people, a lot of times what's missing is purpose, and they don't really have a great grip on why are we here? Why am I maneuvering through life? Why am I going through this monotony or whatever? A lot of that is addressed by taking this,
because if you took the creation brick out of the equation, Yeah, you have trouble answering the purpose question.
Right.
If the gospel for us is like Jesus died to save us from our sins so we can be in heaven with him one day, which is all part of it.
Right.
That is that is
Yes.
a major part of the gospel.
Yes.
But the natural question now that's gonna be like, okay, well,
why do I care? What does this even matter?
Yeah, well, then,
We're just
or like, why don't we fast forward to that then? Like, why do I just sit in here and wait?
Right.
For that day to come? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And without the creation brick, I think we lose that sense of maybe what purpose we're to have in the present.
That's great. If you want to have some fun with it, maybe have like a portion of the conversation where you imagine what will be. Like so we read about the beginning of the creation, but we know that God is moving this into eternity. His creation he doesn't do redos. He's going to restore all this. And what does that look like? How exciting is that? A bone to pick I've always had with like a lot of the conversations Christians have is we don't talk about that. So that's super exciting to think about the consummate kingdom. It's super exciting to think about what we'll be doing in it.
How your purpose and calling, like what continuity will that be between who you are now, who God created you to be, and what you'll do
without the thistles and thorns, without the thistles and thorns, without the sting of the tail, without all that stuff that you hear about all the time. That is Mars of Snow. Yeah.
Brock writes one song a week for offering. Extrapolate that infinitely, man. You're gonna be.
Don't do that. On a more serious note, if we talk to our children with excitement about that stuff, I think it's one of my favorite things about life is the uniqueness of each individual human being. And you just go into the future with that. But more exciting than that, you go into the future without the limitations of gravity, without the limitations of time, without the limitations of fear, inhibition, pain, scars that we bear. What would a relationship be like in that context? All this conversations can be grounded in this.
What would your day-to-day grind of being a plumber? Like? Where I get excited in this conversation is, it's maybe easier to extrapolate, your personal creativity and how that will play out into eternity. But like, I would hope that we could just rediscover a sense of purpose in even like the mundane stuff of our day to day. Like not songwriting, but like carpentry or whatever kind of detached,
the things
office job task you're doing, or whatever it may be, or just or childcare, or what the things that we spend our time doing, made in the image of God, and therefore given the role of representing God by, bringing order to creation, by naming things and cultivating things and bringing order and goodness to those things, such that people are like, wow, God, I see God in that. How could people see God in your plumbing work, or your roofing, or your real estate agenting, or whatever it is, what I mean? Or your homeschooling, whatever it may be.
If you imagine meeting a person that speaks and thinks like this, that what they're doing is going to be eternal, what they're doing is filled with purpose, and you're going to have a magnetism to that person, and you're going to have a magnetism to the way that person lives. That's then going to create questions about your life, which offers you opportunities to speak of Jesus, which is probably the most eternal thing you'll do. And I have to remind myself once a day, actually, and I'm somewhat ashamed of this, but I have to remind myself once a day of what will live into eternity. And even this is a fascinating theological question, that what you're doing now is impacting eternity right now. Like, that's a wild thought to wrap your mind around. But when you start thinking about that, you start thinking about how you're a child of God, how you're made in his image, you live differently, you speak differently. So I love that brick analogy because it's true. If you don't get that right, if that's not firm in your mind, you don't have a firm understanding of that. As we move forward,
a lot of what follows won't make as much sense.
I hope you're doing it.
Yeah, we're in. We're 2 weeks in. We have been created with a purpose, a God-given purpose, and then humans proceeded to say, nah, and throw it all away, which is where we're at next week. So brick number 3 is a brick right through our big picture window of metaphors.
Show up on Sunday, Ron's going to break down sin. It's going to be like watching Evel Knievel make that jump. We'll see if he can do it. Expectations high. That's what he likes. He likes the expectations. Very, very high. Attempt.
It's about the journey over the chasm, not the destination.
Cool.